Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to focus on something our source material suggests really cuts through the noise, the usual left versus right arguments.
That's right.
We're looking at the core issue of American oligarchy.
Yeah, and when you dig into the research, it seems like that political divide, it often just distracts from the fundamental problem,
Because,
unprecedented income and wealth inequality, and alongside that, the huge influence billionaires have over the political system, over the media. It's systemic.
okay, so our mission today, for you listening, is pretty straightforward. We want to get into the hard data, really understand what the average American family is actually facing. Because how is it possible? You've got the richest country in world history, and yet something like 60% of the population is living paycheck to paycheck.
That paradox, it really sums up the crisis, doesn't it?
It really does. So that's our starting point.
And to really get a handle on the scale of this, you kind of have to look back maybe over the last half century or so economically.
Right. Compare productivity and wages.
Exactly. Measure what we're producing against what people are actually earning.
Okay, let's unpack that timeline then. We're going back, about 52 years, starting around 1973.
Roughly, yeah.
And if you look at those 5 decades, it's been an absolute explosion in tech, automation, worker productivity.
Such a massive gains.
In any kind of sane economic setup, you'd think, okay, the average worker must be way better off today.
That's the logical assumption, absolutely. But the fascinating thing, the data shows the economic progress, it just stopped trickling down, almost exactly around that 1973 point.
It's like a tap turned off.
Pretty much. And the numbers, they tell this really stunning story about prosperity that just wasn't shared.
And there's a really shocking fact, the one that jumps out from the sources. Real inflation-adjusted weekly wages for the average American worker, they're actually lower today. Lower than they were back in the early 70s, after 50 years of incredible technological leaps.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around considering the output, the efficiency gains, and that stagnation, that failure to lift wages, it represents this, enormous transfer of wealth. One of the biggest in modern history, really.
And what kind of scale are we talking about here? How big is this transfer?
We're talking huge numbers. According to the Rand Corporation, and they're, a respected nonpartisan group known for solid economic work.
Right, they do rigorous modeling.
Exactly. They calculate a staggering $75 trillion transfer of wealth over this period.
$75 trillion.
Yeah. That money moved from the bottom 90% of Americans straight up to the top 1%.
Wow. Okay, just to put $75 trillion in perspective for everyone listening.
Yeah.
That's not just like potential gains people missed out on.
No.
That's wealth that was created by all that increased productivity, but it was essentially captured entirely by the very, very top.
That's almost an unimaginable amount of money. It completely reframes the whole economic debate, doesn't it?
It really does.
The gains were there, they happened, but the mechanisms for sharing them, fair wages, strong unions, maybe progressive taxes, those have been weakened or dismantled.
So all the benefits from automation, efficiency, they just flowed upwards.
To the ownership class, basically.
Okay, so on one side, you've got these wages that have basically flatlined for 50 years. Now, let's look at the other side of the coin. The cost of living, because that's where the squeeze really becomes painful for people.
And what's really key here, the cost increases, they aren't even across the board. Since, say, the year 2000, prices overall are up about 74%.
Okay, we can all think of things that have gotten cheaper.
Oh, absolutely. Globalization, manufacturing efficiency, consumer electronics are way down. TVs are practically 100% cheaper in real terms.
New cars, too, adjusted for inflation, haven't gone crazy.
Right. You can get cheap stuff, consumer goods, generally.
But the moment you shift from those kind of optional goods to the absolute necessities,
right,
the things every single family needs just to survive and maybe get ahead.
That's where the costs just explode.
Yeah, the two big ones, the critical categories that have just skyrocketed, we're talking 200% increases. Healthcare and education.
200%. And that's where the real economic pain is concentrated. These are the building blocks for any kind of stable middle-class life.
Take healthcare.
Okay, healthcare. The U.S. spends 3 times more per person than the U.K., and twice as much as the average OECD country.
And just quickly, the OECD, that's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, basically the club of developed wealthy nations.
Right. So we're spending way, way more than our peers.
Dramatically more.
Precisely. But here's the kicker. We spend all that money, Yet Americans live 3 to 4 years shorter lives than people in those other countries.
So more spending, worse outcomes.
It's an incredibly expensive system delivering subpar results. And on top of that, you still have 85 million Americans who are uninsured or, severely underinsured.
It sounds completely broken. Predatory, even.
That's a word used in the sources, yeah.
Okay, then there's housing. The sources describe housing costs as just off the charts.
Yeah. And when you put stagnant wages together with rents that are just going through the roof, well, you get social tragedy.
What does that look like on the ground?
Think about this. 800,000 people homeless. 800,000. And then you've got 20 million households, 20 million spending over half their limited income, 50% or more, just to keep a roof over their heads.
50% on housing alone.
Imagine the fragility that creates. I mean, there are no savings, right? No buffer for emergencies, no real way to improve your situation.
And education. This was supposed to be the great equalizer, right? The path up.
It was. Historically, good public colleges, universities, they used to be basically free in the U.S. before the 1960s anyway.
Okay.
Now, that path is just paved with debt. We saw these anecdotes in the source material. Someone getting 2 degrees in the UK, their total debt was less than 1 year of tuition at many U.S. universities.
Just staggering costs. And tied into the healthcare issue, there's this nutrition crisis, too.
Yeah, that's another layer. When the only food you can afford is highly processed junk and, decent quality organic food is really expensive.
That feeds directly into public health problems.
Exactly. Obesity, diabetes, especially among kids, which then puts more strain on the already broken healthcare system. It's a vicious cycle.
So if we kind of zoom out from all that,
Yeah.
the picture seems pretty clear.
It is. The top 1% basically vacuumed up almost all the productivity gains
While the average family got zero wage growth.
and faced these absolutely crushing cost increases for the non-negotiables. Shelter, health, education, costs jumping by hundreds of percent.
It's like a pressure cooker.
Exactly. And that pressure cooker, that's the backdrop for, everything else we need to talk about.
Which leads us right into this idea of oligarchy, which isn't just about having a lot of money, it's about having centralized control.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at corporate power concentration first.
Okay. The centralization of ownership in the U.S. market is, it's truly staggering. The sources point out that just 3 major Wall Street firms, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, they are the major stockholders in 95% of S&P 500 corporations.
95%.
Yeah.
Held by just 3 firms. That's almost everything.
It's practically universal ownership at the top.
So what does that mean? What's the practical effect of having so few entities owning so much?
Well, it fundamentally undermines genuine competition. Think about it. If the same few firms own supposedly competing companies in the same sector, like, big soda brands or airlines,
Right.
it makes it incredibly easy for that handful of corporations to just avoid competing hard on price. It enables what's essentially price manipulation, or at least quiet collusion.
Why cut prices if your owners also own your main rivals? There's no incentive.
Exactly. And that concentration of economic power, it translates directly into political control. A huge turning point there, according to the sources, was the Citizens United Supreme Court decision back in 2010.
Ah, yes. Citizens United. Explain that impact.
Citizens United basically blew the doors off campaign finance limits. Before that, there were at least some restrictions on corporate and union spending in elections.
But this decision created super PACs.
Right, these independent expenditure-only committees.
Yeah.
And the simple version is, it allowed billionaires and corporations to pour absolutely unlimited amounts of often untraceable dark money into elections to sway the outcome.
So it basically created a system where, political power could be bought or at least heavily influenced by money?
Pretty much, yeah, heavily rented, as you say. The sources give this specific example. One individual, Elon Musk, spending $270 million to help elect just one candidate.
$270 million from one person.
When the system allows that kind of direct financial firepower, it's not hard to see why so many people feel like the whole political process is just rigged.
Yeah, you can understand the cynicism.
Absolutely. The system is basically set up to favor wealthy incumbents who can always tap into that massive fundraising network.
So faced with that level of, financial corruption, what kind of policy solutions do the sources suggest? How do you fight back?
They focus on 2 main things. First, there needs to be a constitutional push to overturn Citizens United, or at least neutralize its effects.
Okay, get rid of the legal basis for unlimited spending.
Right. And second, we need to move decisively towards public funding of elections.
Okay, tell us more about public funding. How would that work?
The idea is to level the playing field, remove that huge financial advantage incumbents have. So for a challenger, maybe if they can demonstrate real grassroots support, say, get 5,000 people to give just $5 each.
Okay, prove they have actual popular backing.
Exactly. Then they would qualify for equal public funding to run against the incumbent.
So it limits the power of, a few billionaires to just bankroll their preferred candidates and effectively control politicians before they even get sworn in.
That's the goal. Reduce the influence of that concentrated wealth.
Okay, now let's pivot slightly to the political dysfunction itself. How does this reliance on dark money actually change how politicians behave once they are in office?
Well, it creates this really intense pressure for internal party loyalty. We're seeing, especially in one party, this incredibly high degree of conformity. Politicians are clearly scared to step out of line to differentiate themselves from the leader or the party's official stance.
Dissent gets punished.
Instantly. And the punishment is swift and it's often financial, isn't it?
Seems like it.
Yeah, the source material makes it clear the fear is real. It's the threat of getting primaried, facing a challenge within your own party, funded by those billionaire-backed super PACs.
Oh.
They gave the example of Senator Tom Tillis.
Wow.
He briefly opposed a major bill supported by the party leader.
Yeah.
Within hours, he was denounced publicly, targeted by big money donors, and he very quickly had to backtrack. It shows the loyalty is often dictated by money, not necessarily ideology or what constituents want.
Wow. Okay, so if that's the pressure on the Republican side, let's look at what the sources call a political own goal by the Democrats, particularly regarding the economy.
Right. The analysis suggests that starting back in the 1970s, the Democratic Party made this fundamental strategic mistake.
Which was?
They decided they needed to compete with Republicans for money. So they started actively courting corporate America, the wealthy donor class.
Okay, chasing the big checks. What was the consequence of doing that?
Well, for the working class, it was pretty catastrophic. The Democrats had historically been seen as the party of the American worker, right?
Traditionally, yes.
But by chasing that corporate money, they started supporting these, frankly, disastrous trade deals. Things like NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China.
Deals that led to job losses.
Massive job losses. Thousands of factories closed. Millions of good-paying manufacturing jobs just disappeared, shipped overseas.
So they essentially turned their back on the economic interests of their traditional blue-collar base.
That's the argument, yeah. Precisely. And the result, politically, you see more working-class people voting for figures like Donald Trump.
Even if they disagree on other policies.
Yeah, they might hate his tax cuts for the rich, for example. But they feel like the Democratic Party just abandoned them economically. Trump speaks to that feeling of being left behind, culturally and economically.
And this vacuum, this feeling of economic abandonment, it creates the perfect breeding ground for demagogues, doesn't it?
Absolutely perfect, because instead of actually tackling the really complex, difficult problems like massive inequality or the climate crisis or the fact that U.S. students are ranking, 37th globally in math and science?
Which is appalling.
Right? Instead of dealing with that, demagogues just ignore it all.
And they focus instead on creating division.
Totally. They create an us versus them narrative. They demonize often powerless minority groups, undocumented immigrants, the trans community, whoever the target of the day is. It's a classic distraction.
Deflect attention from the real issues.
And it's crucial to stick to the facts here. The source material points out, for instance, the crime rate among the undocumented community in the U.S. is actually lower than the crime rate for native-born Americans.
So the demonization isn't based on reality.
Not at all. It has nothing to do with solving actual problems. It's all about shifting blame and deflecting attention from the economic failures caused by the oligarchy.
Which brings us to this really kind of unsettling societal paradox that the sources highlight. Despite all the technological progress, smartphones, medical miracles, driverless cars on the horizon, a Pew Research poll found 58% of Americans actually think life was better for people like them 50 years ago.
Yeah, 58%.
Why? Why that feeling of loss amidst so much supposed progress?
The analysis suggests it's that combination of things we've talked about.
Yeah.
The constant economic strain, yes, but also a documented loss of community, of stability. People just feel less secure even if their phone is faster.
And that insecurity, it seems poised to get worse, potentially.
Well, yeah. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, technology and the future of work.
AI, robotics.
Right. The sources are very clear. Billionaires are pouring enormous sums into AI and robotics right now. And the explicit goal, for many, is to achieve an incredible loss of decent paying jobs.
Particularly those entry-level jobs.
Exactly. The jobs that historically let young people get a foot on the ladder, learn skills, start building a career, those seem particularly vulnerable.
So this technological leap, it demands some kind of proactive solution, right? To make
Right.
sure the productivity gains don't just become another massive wealth transfer upwards.
Absolutely.
What's the policy mechanism suggested?
The main solution put forward is sharing the benefit of that increased productivity by lowering the standard work week, going from, say, 40 hours down to 32 hours.
A 4-day week.
A 4-day week, crucially, without reducing pay. The logic is, if automation makes workers 25% more productive, they should work 25% less.
Which prevents mass unemployment while hopefully maintaining living standards.
That's the idea. Share the gains.
Okay, that would definitely help ease some pressure. But before we wrap up, there are two critical social issues the sources raise that often get missed in these economic debates. First, the declining birth rate.
Yeah, this is serious. Childcare costs are just astronomical, right? And that's cited as a major factor for why young people are hesitant to start families.
It's financially daunting.
Hugely. And you look at extreme examples like South Korea, where the birth rate has fallen so sharply. Some projections suggest a 96% population decrease over the next century.
96%. That's not some distant sci-fi problem.
No, it requires urgent attention now. It's potentially a bigger crisis long term than many other things we worry about.
Okay, and the second issue, also often ignored, the crisis facing young men.
This is really concerning. The data is just sobering. Suicide rates for men under 30, they've jumped 40% since 2010.
40% increase.
And their suicide rate is 4 times higher than for young women. The total number of deaths actually equals the number of deaths from breast cancer annually.
That's staggering, equal to breast cancer deaths.
Yeah. And furthermore, the stats show that young white men from lower-income backgrounds are actually worse off than their fathers were on almost every single economic and social measure.
Wow.
And the sources argue that while the focus on women's rights and equality has been absolutely vital and necessary,
Of course.
there's been this profound failure by the political establishment, maybe particularly on the left, to really address the specific problems driving despair among young men, or even offer them a positive vision for their future.
Okay, so pulling all this together then.
Mm.
The stagnant wages, the crazy costs,
Yeah.
the concentration of corporate power, the political dysfunction, the resulting social strains. It really feels like the U.S. is at this extraordinary pivotal moment.
It does, a real crossroads.
And the current trends, technology, politics, they seem poised to concentrate power even further, divide people even more.
That's the danger. But the sources, they do end on a more confident note, actually. Confidence in the American people.
How so?
The belief is that fundamentally, Americans are good people. They believe in justice, they believe in democracy, they want an economy that works for everyone, not just the few.
So the potential is there.
The potential is there. The key, according to this analysis, is building a strong, unified grassroots movement, one that resists that easy temptation, the demagogues and oligarchs wanting to divide everyone based on fear or identity.
Fight the division. Focus on the shared economic reality.
Exactly.
Okay, so we learned today that just 3 massive financial firms own 95% of the big S&P corporations. And their biggest investments right now are pouring into AI and robotics specifically designed to replace jobs. If the suggested solution to share the wealth from that productivity is lowering the work week to maybe 32 hours, that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider.
What tangible steps can ordinary citizens actually take to make sure this huge technological transformation benefits them, benefits everybody?
Instead of just further cementing the already immense power of the, few thousand families who effectively own and control so much of the world's wealth already, what do you do?